Hi, and welcome back to English Lessons with Stephanie. This is writing and vocabulary lesson number 6. Here's our vocabulary set for the day. We have 15 vocabulary words or phrases, as well as 3 phrasal verbs. Our first word is draw. Draw in the reading is used as a verb, and we saw it in this sentence in the past participle. I was drawn to his warmth, lively spirit, and sense of humor. So you probably know that draw can mean to make a picture, to make a drawing, but draw also has this other meaning, which means to attract or cause something to move closer to you. So if you are drawn to someone, that means you are attracted to them, then you want to be closer to them. We can also use draw as a countable noun, like what is the draw, what is the attraction? So you could say, wow, a lot of people like to watch race car driving. But I don't understand the draw. I don't understand the attraction because I don't like to watch race car driving. And in our verb column, we can see that draw is an irregular verb. Simple present form is draw, the past tense is drew, and drawn is the past participle. In our second example, we use the past tense. The ad drew people's attention with a clever song. And in our third example, we have the noun form. Why do so many people play video games? What's the draw? What's the attraction? Next, we have a very common phrase, sense of humor. Sense and humor are both nouns, and put together, we have a noun phrase. And a sense of humor means the ability to be funny or to find other people funny. So when we talk about people's senses of humor, we either say they have one or they don't have one. So if you have a sense of humor, that means you are able to make other people laugh, or you are able to laugh a lot yourself. If you don't have a sense of humor, that means you probably don't laugh a lot and you probably don't make very many jokes. We often say people have good senses of humor or bad senses of humor. A good sense of humor means that you make people laugh in a good way that's not mean, and you don't make fun of other people. And if you have a bad sense of humor, maybe you make bad jokes or you laugh at wrong, inappropriate times. So in the second example, Yolanda and I have similar senses of humor. We find the same things funny. Or she has a great sense of humor. She can always make me laugh. And if you want to make it plural, like in the second example, you see that we say senses of humor, not sense of humors. And we would say this is something that you have. So you can see in these examples, we use the verb have to describe senses of humor. And the reason why we say that someone has a sense of humor is because we don't have a noun form for the word funny, right? If someone has a sense of humor, we can say funny, they're funny. But we don't have a noun form. We don't say she has funniness. We say she has a sense of humor. And also note that since this is a countable noun, we will need to say a sense of humor when it's singular, like in this last example. Our next word is opposite. Opposite is a countable noun, and it means something that is completely different from something else. And you can see the complete word family. We have oppose, which is a verb, and we have 2 adjective forms, opposite and opposing. And then we can also use opposite as a preposition. And I'm going to show you these different examples. Okay, so in our first example, in a lot of ways, we were complete opposites. This is from the reading, and this is the noun form. So we're saying that he and I were totally different from each other. Then in the second example, positive is the opposite of negative. That is also a noun. And you can tell it's a noun because we say the opposite. In the third example, everyone opposed his plan. We can see that this is our transitive verb. When we use it as a verb, we're saying everyone is against it. They disagree with it. Like our opinions, our feelings are completely different. In the next example, we sat on opposite sides of the table. We're describing 2 different sides of the table. So here, opposite is being used as an adjective. And finally, we have the preposition example for opposite. He sat opposite me. That's like saying he sat across from me, so on the opposite side of the table. So the last two examples have the same meaning, but they are just different grammatically. Our next phrase is out of place. And out of place is used as an adjective phrase. So remember from the reading, out of place means it's a feeling like something or someone shouldn't be there, like you don't belong. So in the reading, I said, I always felt out of place. That means I felt like I didn't belong there. I shouldn't be there. And the next example, the teenager felt out of place at his new school. Or the next example, the badly dressed man seemed out of place at the ballet. So you can see that this is used as an adjective phrase. Our next phrase is on one's own. On one's own is another adjective phrase. So on one's own means alone or independently. You did something all by yourself. So in the reading we said he'd been on his own for a long time, which means he'd been living by himself, he was taking care of himself, all independently. In the next example we say, she prefers to live on her own rather than have roommates. Here we use on her own as an adverb phrase because it describes the verb live. Similarly, in the last example, I don't need help, I can do this on my own, we are using an adverb phrase to describe the verb do. Next, we have a verb, introduce. Introduce is a transitive verb. It means to make someone meet someone else. So if I say to you, hey, Samantha, meet my friend George. I'm introducing Samantha and George to each other. They don't know each other, and I'm telling them, say hello. Try to get to know each other. Because introduce is a transitive verb, we use the person or the thing after it. So in this example, he introduced me to my first boyfriend. So notice that we have to use the preposition to after the object, before the indirect object. So he introduced me to my first boyfriend. I introduced Samantha to George. We can also use introduce with things other than people. So I could say, I'm going to introduce you to a great restaurant. That means I'm going to take you to this restaurant for your first time. Or I'm going to introduce you to this amazing food that you've never had before. In the second example, we have introduction as a noun. We don't need an introduction. We're old friends. And because it's a countable noun, we need to put that article in front of it. And then in the last example, we see introductory, which is our adjective form. I took an introductory biology course. An introductory biology course would mean it is one of the first biology courses you've taken. So it will help to introduce you to beginning biology. Our next word is weird, and weird is a very common American English word. Weird means the same thing as strange or unusual, but it's more commonly used than strange and unusual, which are kind of more formal words. Weird is kind of an informal word. Weird is an adjective. In the reading, it was used as a comparative adjective. We said the stories he told me became weirder. That means more weird. Weird we also often use as a phrasal verb, weird out, which is a separable phrasal verb. So if we think something is weird, we say it weirds us out. So in the second example, it says, I didn't like that movie. The ending weirded me out. That means I thought the ending was weird. And we can also say, I weirded her out. That means I made her think something was weird. Like I made her feel strange. Like I weirded her out when I told that bad joke. And we also use the adverb form often, weirdly. Like in this last example, the class was good, but weirdly, I was the only female. And these are all common forms of the word weird. There is a noun form, weirdness, which we don't use as often as the other forms. Our next word is rob, and rob means to steal things from someone else. If you are robbed personally, if someone robs you, this is a transitive verb, so you have to rob someone or something. So if someone robs you, that means they take something from you, from your person. And you can also rob a place, like a house or a bank. Robber is the person and robbery is the action. And in this other column, I wrote armed robbery, which is a common expression. Armed robbery is a robbery using a weapon, like a gun or a knife. In the story, we use rob in the passive form. He was robbed. That means someone robbed him. Our next word is scatter. In the reading, we use the word scattered as an adjective, but scattered comes from the verb scatter, which means to spread something randomly, like put something small over a larger area. So let's look at the second two examples first. The farmer scattered the vegetable seeds. That means the farmer is throwing these small things in a large area kind of randomly. That means he's not placing them carefully. He's just throwing them around. Or in the last example, the robbers scattered when they heard the police coming. That means these robbers all went in different directions. They went over a large area and they were difficult to follow. So going back to the first example, he was moody, vulnerable, and scattered. And scattered as an adjective means his mind was in a lot of places. It's like hard to follow him. We use the adjective scattered to describe a state of mind when we can't focus or it's difficult to follow what we're thinking. Next, we have the adjective hilarious. And hilarious means very funny. We use this word a lot because if something is very funny, we don't usually say, oh, it was very, very funny. We say it was hilarious. So in the reading, I say he was the same Chris I had always known and loved, thoughtful, hilarious, and adventurous. Right? So hilarious means he's not just funny, he's really funny. If we see a great movie, we say that movie was hilarious. I couldn't stop laughing. Our next word is urgent, which is an adjective. In the reading, we said, his calls to me became increasingly urgent and stressful. Because urgent means something needs your attention immediately. If you go to a hospital, they usually have a department called urgent care. Urgent care means you need to see a doctor right away. It's very important. It's like an emergency. So urgency is the noun form and urgently is the adverb form. There is no verb form. So in our second example, she said she had to talk to me urgently. I'm worried it must be something important, right? So if someone says, I need to speak to you urgently, you might get worried. And in our last example, you don't have to hurry. It's nothing urgent, right? That means it's not something that needs your attention now. It can wait. It's not a big deal. Our next word is stressful. And stressful is another word that we use a lot. So let's talk about the full word family here. So stress, our non-count noun, means a feeling of anxiety, discomfort, and worry, right? This is the feeling you get before a big test or when you have a lot of problems on your mind and you don't know what to do. That feeling you get in your stomach and in your body and in your heart that causes you to worry and feel sick a little bit and not be able to sleep, that is stress. Stress can also be used as a verb, and it means to cause someone stress. So if something stresses you, that means it's causing you stress. In American English, we typically make this into a phrasal verb. So just like we say, this weirds me out, we say, this stresses me out. That means it causes me stress. Okay, in our third column, our adjectives, we have a couple different adjective forms. Pay close attention here because people often get these confused. If something is stressful, that means it causes you stress. If your job causes you stress, you say that your job is stressful. And the feeling that you get from your job is the effect. You feel stressed. Or we say, I feel stressed out. We put that extra particle at the end. It's more common to say I'm really stressed out than to say I'm really stressed. So in the reading, the example was, his calls to me became increasingly urgent and stressful. That means the phone calls were stressful. That means when I got the phone calls, I felt stressed out. In the next example, my new job is causing me a lot of stress. That's stress used as the non-count noun, the feeling. And then in the last example, we see it used as a verb. Exams really stress me out. I can never sleep the night before a big exam. So when you're practicing this word, I encourage you to try and use all these forms because this is a very common feeling and so very commonly used in English. Okay, our next word is crisis. And crisis is an irregular noun. So the singular form is crisis and the plural form is crises. So we change the I to an E. Crisis means a dangerous or stressful situation. So in the reading, we said, I tried to understand his latest crisis and reassure him that everything would be okay. That means he was in a stressful situation a lot. So he always had a crisis that he needed to talk about. The second example says the military created a political crisis when it kidnapped those soldiers. So this is a crisis that's related to politics, right? And in the last example, my job is so stressful, it's one crisis after another. That means every day there is a crisis, a stressful situation. In the last column for other, I wrote down 3 different phrases that we hear often with the word crisis. The first one is midlife crisis. This is not really a dangerous situation, but this is a common American English phrase when we talk about someone who's in the middle of their life and they become stressed about their careers or their families or their life. They get to the middle point of their life and they say, what am I doing with my life? And oftentimes the joke here is that, people go out and they buy new cars or they divorce their spouse and they go find a new boyfriend or girlfriend. They just try to make their life different because they feel stressed about their life. The next phrase is economic crisis, because there are frequently stressful situations in the economy. And then finally, a humanitarian crisis. That means there's a bad situation for people, which could be a war or some kind of environmental disaster where people are suffering. Our next word is reassure. Reassure is a verb that means to comfort someone emotionally. That means you try to make them feel better. So our example was, I tried to understand his latest crisis and reassure him that everything would be okay. And up here we can see that reassure has a complete word family. The noun form is reassurance. Then there are 2 adjective forms, reassured and reassuring, and an adverb form, reassuringly. So in this last example, we have an adjective form. The president's speech during the crisis was very reassuring. Everyone felt better after hearing him. Next, we have the verb dread, which is a transitive verb that means to wait for something bad. So dread is basically the opposite of looking forward to. If you look forward to something, that means you're excited about it. Like you look forward to a party, or you look forward to seeing your friends. If you dread something, that means it's going to happen, but you don't want it to happen. So you would dread taking a test, or you would dread seeing someone that you dislike. So in the reading, we say, I began to dread his phone calls. That means I know he's going to call me, but I don't want to talk to him. Up here, we see that dread also can be a noun. It's a non-count noun because it's the feeling of waiting for something bad to happen. Then we have the adjective form dreadful, which describes the thing that's causing you dread. And the adverb dreadfully, which just means very much in a bad way. So in the second example, I feel a sense of dread when the phone rings in the middle of the night. That means you wake up, the phone is ringing, and you feel like it must be something bad and you don't want to answer the phone. And in the last example, this meal is absolutely dreadful. That means it's terrible. Okay, finally, we're going to end with 3 different phrasal verbs. The first one is set up. So set up means to create or establish something. In the reading, we said wherever you went, you could set up a new life for yourself and be okay. That means you go and you create a new life. You make a new life for yourself. So set up could be intransitive or transitive. Just like the verb create. You can say, I create And when it's used as a transitive verb, it is separable. So in the second example, we spent all afternoon setting up for the party. You could also say, I set everything up. I set the party up. That means you put everything in place for the party to happen. Or in the last example, I need to set up a new bank account. You can say to your friend, yes, I needed to set up a new bank account, so I set it up. And set up can also be used as a noun. You can see that when we use it as a noun, we take away the space in the middle, so it just becomes one word, and it would be a countable noun. So you could say, I have a new apartment and I really like the new setup. That means you really like how everything is in that place. The next phrasal verb is call off. Call off is a transitive verb that is separable. That means cancel. So in the reading, we said, I cried with him when the wedding was called off. That means no more wedding. The wedding was canceled. In the second example, most college graduations were called off because of the coronavirus pandemic. And in our last example, we had a date planned, but I had to call it off when I got sick. And our last phrasal verb is follow up. Follow up means to check on a specific matter later. So that means you are going to check on something later. In the reading, we said, when I would try to follow up with him to see how he was doing, I wouldn't be able to reach him. That means she's checking up on him to make sure he's okay after a specific phone call. In our second example, you should follow up with the woman who interviewed you for that job. Email her or call her. And finally, he said we should have lunch, but then he never followed up with me. So notice, and in all of these examples, we say follow up with someone. That's because follow up is an inseparable phrasal verb that is often followed with. In all these examples, we're using it as an intransitive, inseparable phrasal verb. It could be used in a transitive way, but it's not very common. What's more common is the noun form follow up, which refers to the action of checking back on something later. So you could say, if you go see the doctor for a problem, and then the doctor wants to see you again to make sure you're okay 6 weeks later, the doctor will say, yeah, let's do a follow-up in 6 weeks. Okay, so that is it for our vocabulary from class 6. So to practice, you should write a sentence using all these new words, and especially paying attention to the slide on stress, which is an important word, and our phrasal verbs. Next, summarize the week's reading in 1 or 2 sentences, and then we can have a chance to write some paragraphs about these questions. Has a friend or family member ever started to act weirdly? What happened? How did it make you feel? And then, have you ever felt out of place? When and why? So great work today. Continue with speaking lesson 6, and we'll see you next time.